The courtroom went silent when my daughter laughed at the old flip phone trembling in my hands. "Your Honor," Lauren said with a smirk, "that phone belongs in a museum, not in evidence." A few people chuckled. I lowered my eyes ashamed, not because of the phone, but because my own child had become a stranger. My attorney reached for the device one last time before putting it away, then suddenly froze. She stared at the tiny screen and whispered, "Wait, there's an unopened voicemail." No one knew that within the next few minutes, the forgotten voice inside that battered phone would change not only the verdict, but everything my husband had wanted the truth to become. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Those little messages always remind me how many kind hearts are listening together. If this story touches something you've experienced in your own family, please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories about family forgiveness and justice, I'd be honored if you'd like this video and subscribe so we can spend more time together. Long before that courtroom filled with whispers and judgment, the old phone had been nothing more than a small silver object sitting beside my coffee cup. At least that was what everyone else believed. To me, it belonged to the last peaceful chapter of my life. Richard and I had been married for 43 years. We met when I was 22 and working behind the circulation desk at the Charleston County Public Library. He came in every Wednesday after work, always wearing a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. For nearly a month, he borrowed books he clearly had no intention of reading. The first was a gardening guide, though he lived in a second-floor apartment with no yard. The second was a cookbook, even though he later admitted he could barely boil an egg. The third was a collection of romantic poetry. When I teased him about that one, his face turned bright red. "I was hoping the librarian might help me understand it," he said. That was Richard. He never needed grand gestures. He made people feel loved through quiet, careful attention. He remembered how I took my coffee, which flowers made me sneeze, and which days of the year were hardest after my parents passed away. Even after 4 decades together, he still warmed my side of the bed during winter before I climbed beneath the covers. We were never wealthy in the way Lauren eventually came to understand wealth. Richard owned a small office supply company and worked hard enough to give us stability. I spent 36 years at the library before retiring. We paid off our modest 2-story home, saved carefully, and invested whatever remained. Our life was comfortable. More importantly, it was ours. Lauren was our only child. As a little girl, she followed me everywhere. She sat beneath my desk at the library with coloring books while I finished late shifts. At home, she helped Richard sort invoices and pretended his calculator was a telephone. She was curious, determined, and impatient to grow up. When she was 8, she announced that she would someday own a house with marble floors and a staircase wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Richard laughed and said, "Then your mother and I had better start saving for comfortable shoes." Lauren did build that life. After college, she entered real estate. Within a few years, she was selling waterfront properties to executive surgeons and retired athletes. She learned how to speak with polished confidence and how to make every room feel as though it belonged to her. At first, Richard and I were proud. We attended every award dinner. Richard saved newspaper advertisements with her photograph in them. I carried her business cards in my purse and gave them to strangers who mentioned moving. But success changed the way Lauren measured people. She began noticing labels, prices, addresses, and appearances before she noticed kindness. She replaced her car every 2 years. She redesigned her kitchen 3 times. She spoke about houses not as homes, but as investments waiting to be improved or sold. Eventually, she started looking at me the same way. The first time she criticized my phone, we were having lunch at a restaurant near King Street. My little silver flip phone rang inside my purse. The ringtone was an old-fashioned chime that Richard had chosen because he said it sounded cheerful. Lauren closed her eyes as though the sound physically hurt her. "Mom, Please tell me you're not still using that thing. I pulled it out and checked the screen. It still works. That isn't the point. What is the point? She leaned closer and lowered her voice. People notice. I looked around the restaurant. No one was paying attention to us. Who notices? My clients might. People I work with. Ethan's colleagues. I smiled because I thought she was joking. She was not. A week later, a brand new smartphone arrived at my house. Lauren had already transferred a phone number onto it and attached a note explaining how much easier my life would become. I left it unopened on the kitchen counter. When she visited that Sunday, she stared at the box. You haven't even tried it. I didn't ask for it. It has maps, email, video calls, everything. My old phone makes calls. Mom, you sound 80 years old. I'm 67. That isn't helping your argument. Richard had been sitting at the table reading the newspaper. He lowered it slowly. Leave her alone, Lauren. I'm trying to help her. No, he said calmly. You're trying to make her look more acceptable to you. The room went quiet. Lauren grabbed her purse and left before dessert. That argument became the first of many. She complained that my clothes were outdated, that our wallpaper made the house look tired, and that Richard's filing cabinets belonged in a junkyard. Whenever she visited, she seemed to mentally calculate the value of everything around her. Still, the phone bothered her most, perhaps because I refused to explain why I kept it. Richard had bought it for me on our 40th wedding anniversary. He had placed the tiny box beside my breakfast plate, with a red ribbon tied around it. I laughed when I opened it. Richard, this looks exactly like my old phone. It is slightly better. How the buttons are bigger. He demonstrated each feature as if he had invented the device himself. He programmed his number into the first speed dial position and set our wedding photograph as the background. At the time, the gift seemed practical and sweet. Only later did it become something else. During the final year of his life, Richard grew more protective of that phone. He checked that it was charged. He reminded me not to leave it in the car. Once, when I mentioned replacing it because the hinge had become loose, he reacted so quickly that I almost dropped my coffee. Don't replace it. I stared at him. I was only thinking about it. Promise me you'll keep it. His voice sounded serious enough to frighten me. Why? He looked toward the kitchen doorway as if afraid someone might be listening. Then his expression softened. Because I gave it to you. That cannot be the only reason. For a moment, I thought he might tell me something important. Instead, he took my hand. If a day comes when I'm not don't be too quick to throw it away. Because I gave it to you. That cannot be the only reason. For a moment, I thought he might tell me something important. Instead, he took my hand. If a day comes when I'm not here, don't be too quick to throw it away. I squeezed his fingers. Stop talking like that. Martha, I mean it. You're healthy. Your doctor said your heart was fine. He gave me a sad little smile. Doctors know many things. They don't know everything. I pulled my hand away and busied myself with the dishes because I did not want him to see the fear in my face. That conversation stayed with me. Months later, Lauren visited with another expensive smartphone. She placed it in front of me as if presenting a solution to a problem. Use this, she said. I'm embarrassed every time that old phone rings in public. Richard was standing behind her. I saw his jaw tighten. Before I could respond, he stepped forward and picked up the new device. Martha doesn't need it. Lauren turned toward him. Dad, this is ridiculous. No. What's ridiculous is believing something has no value simply because it's old. Lauren laughed. It's a phone, Dad, not a family heirloom. Richard looked at her for a long moment. There was something in his eyes I did not understand. Then disappointment, perhaps, but also caution. He handed the new phone back to her. Sometimes, old things remember what people prefer to forget. Lauren rolled her eyes and left the room. I asked Richard what he meant. He kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. That night, I woke shortly after midnight and found his side of the bed empty. A dim light glowed beneath the door of his study. When I walked down the hallway, I heard his voice speaking quietly. At first, I assumed he was on a business call. Then I realized he was using my old flip phone. The moment I entered, he closed it. "Who are you calling?" I asked. "No one you need to worry about." His answer made no sense. Richard had never hidden things from me. I waited for him to explain, but he simply placed the phone in my hand. "Keep this close, Martha. No one you need to worry about." His answer made no sense. Richard had never hidden things from me. I waited for him to explain, but he simply placed the phone in my hand. "Keep this close, Martha." Then he repeated the words I would remember months later, while sitting alone in a courtroom with our daughter across from me. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "don't ever throw this phone away." Richard died on a Tuesday morning in early October. There had been no long illness, no hospital room filled with machines, and no final conversation in which we said everything that needed to be said. One moment, he was standing in our kitchen, pouring coffee into the blue ceramic mug Lauren had made for him in elementary school. The next, the mug slipped from his hand and shattered across the floor. I heard the crash from the laundry room. By the time I reached him, Richard was lying beside the kitchen table, with one hand pressed against his chest. His eyes found mine. "Martha," he whispered. I dropped to my knees and called 911 with the old flip phone. The dispatcher told me what to do while I pressed my hands against Richard's chest. I counted aloud, trying to keep my voice steady, but every number felt like a prayer that was not being answered. The paramedics arrived quickly. It still was not quickly enough. Richard was pronounced dead at the hospital less than an hour later. The doctor called it a massive heart attack. He said there was likely nothing anyone could have done. People say those words to comfort you. There was nothing you could have done. But grief does not listen to reason. For weeks, I replayed that morning in my mind. I wondered whether Richard had seemed tired the night before. I wondered why I had not noticed the way he rubbed his chest after dinner. I wondered whether I should have insisted on another medical examination. Most of all, I wondered what he had been trying to say when he whispered my name. Lauren arrived at the hospital with Ethan. She rushed toward me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. For those first few hours, she was my little girl again. She cried against my coat. She held my hand while the nurse returned Richard's wedding ring. She handled the calls to relatives because I could barely form complete sentences. At the funeral, she stood beside me beneath a gray Charleston sky and promised I would never be alone. "I'll take care of everything, Mom," she said. I believed her. For a brief time, grief covered the distance between us. Lauren came to the house almost every day. She brought groceries, opened mail, and answered questions from the funeral home. Ethan contacted Richard's accountant and gathered documents from the office. I was grateful. I was also too numb to notice how often Lauren disappeared into Richard's study. One afternoon, I found her standing beside his filing cabinet with several folders open across the desk. "What are you looking for?" I asked. She turned too quickly. "Insurance papers. Did you find them?" "Not yet." Richard had kept our records organized with almost obsessive care. Insurance documents were clearly labeled in the second drawer. Lauren knew that. I should have asked more questions, but I was exhausted from grieving. I let the moment pass. 3 weeks after the funeral, we met at the office of Richard's estate attorney, Charles Mercer. His office occupied the second floor of a restored brick building near Meeting Street. The walls were lined with dark wooden shelves, and an antique clock ticked loudly behind his desk. Lauren sat beside Ethan. I sat across from them, holding my old phone inside my purse. Charles removed his glasses and spoke gently. Richard updated his estate plan 14 months ago. Lauren glanced at Ethan. I had known Richard reviewed our finances regularly, but I had never asked for details. He always said there was enough for both of us, and that I would be protected. Charles began reading. Richard left our home his remaining business interests, retirement accounts, and the majority of his investments to me. Lauren received a trust valued at nearly $200,000, along with a collection of municipal bonds Richard had purchased for her years earlier. It was not a small inheritance, but Lauren's expression hardened with every sentence. When Charles finished, silence filled the room. Lauren leaned forward. "That's it." Charles looked confused. "The trust and bonds are substantial. I'm his daughter." "Yes." "And she receives everything else." I felt the word "she" strike me harder than if Lauren had said my name. "Lauren," I whispered, "your father wanted me to be secure. You already had half of everything." Ethan placed a hand on her arm, but she pulled away. Charles explained that the estate plan was legally sound and that Richard had been clear about his intentions. Lauren stared directly at me. "When did he change it?" 14 months ago?" Charles repeated. "That was around the time Richard had become strangely protective of my phone. I did not understand the connection then." Lauren stood so abruptly that her chair scraped against the floor. "He wasn't thinking clearly." Charles' expression changed. "I met with your father privately. He understood every provision. You didn't live with him." "No," La Yurin said, turning toward me. "She did." Charles's expression changed. "I met with your father privately. He understood every provision." "You didn't live with him." "No," Lauren said, turning toward me. "She did." The accusation was clear before she spoke it aloud. "You convinced him to cut me out. I did no such thing." "You expect me to believe Dad chose to leave almost everything to you? He did not cut you out. He left you more money than many people earn in years. This isn't about the amount." But it was. We all knew it. Lauren left the office without saying goodbye. Ethan paused at the door. "I'm sorry, Martha. She's grieving." I wanted to believe him. 2 weeks later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my house. Inside was a petition challenging Richard's will. Lauren claimed that Richard lacked mental capacity when he signed the documents. She also accused me of exercising undue influence over him and isolating him from his family. I read those sentences 3 times. Then I became physically ill. My own daughter was telling a court that I had manipulated the man I loved for 43 years. The allegations spread quickly. Lauren contacted relatives before I had a chance to explain. She told them Richard had been confused, forgetful, and dependent on me during his final year. Some believed her immediately. My sister-in-law, Patricia, stopped answering my calls. Richard's cousin sent me a message saying he hoped the truth would come out. Even 2 former employees from Richard's company signed statements claiming I had discouraged visitors. None of it was true. Richard had reduced his social activities because he was tired of business conversations. He preferred quiet dinners, morning walks, and evenings at home. But ordinary facts can be twisted into ugly shapes when money is involved. Lauren also produced a list of medical appointments, including one visit where Richard had complained of dizziness and temporary confusion after starting a new blood pressure medication. She used that single episode to suggest he had been mentally incapable for months. Ethan helped organize the case. Although he was not the attorney of record, his legal experience gave Lauren confidence. He reviewed documents, contacted specialists, and attended every meeting with her litigation lawyer. The first time I saw them at a preliminary hearing, Lauren did not look at me. She sat beside Ethan with her back straight, and her face calm, as though I were a stranger who had stolen something from her. That day, the judge ordered both sides to exchange financial and medical records. When I returned home, reporters were not waiting outside. There were no television cameras or crowds. There was only silence. That somehow felt worse. I sat at the kitchen table where Richard had died and looked at the chair he used every morning. For the first time since the funeral, I allowed myself to feel angry. Not about the money, about the betrayal. Lauren knew how Richard loved me. She had grown up watching him leave handwritten notes in my lunch bag and bring me tea when I worked late. She knew our marriage had been built on trust. Yet she was willing to turn that love into evidence of manipulation. I found Olivia Grant through a former library colleague whose family had survived an inheritance dispute. Olivia specialized in contested estates and had a reputation for remaining calm when everyone else became emotional. During our first meeting, she read the petition without interrupting. Then she looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Did you pressure your husband to change his will?" "No." "Did you prevent Lauren from seeing him?" "Never." "Did Richard understand his finances?" "Better than anyone I knew." She closed the folder. "Then we begin with the truth." Her certainty gave me my first real breath in weeks. But 3 days later, Olivia called and asked me to come to her office immediately. When I arrived, Richard's medical records, the will, and several calendars were spread across her conference table. She pointed to 3 dates. "The timeline doesn't make sense." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "The medical episode Lauren is relying on happened months after Richard signed the will. Yet one witness claims he was already confused before the signing. Then the witness is wrong." "Possibly." Olivia tapped another document. "But there's something else. Lauren's attorney has submitted notes suggesting she discussed changes to the estate with Richard before he met with Charles Mercer." I stared at her. "Richard never told me that." Olivia leaned back slowly. "I don't think your daughter is simply arguing that her father was confused, Martha. I think something happened during the months before his death." My fingers closed around the old phone in my purse. "What kind of something?" She looked toward the documents again. "That is what we need to find out before Lauren controls the story." Olivia did not begin by accusing anyone. She began with dates. For the next several weeks, her conference room became a map of Richard's final year. Medical records were arranged beside bank statements, appointment calendars, telephone bills, and copies of every document connected to his estate. Colored notes covered one wall. Blue represented Richard's medical appointments. Yellow marked meetings with Charles Mercer. Green showed visits or calls involving Lauren. Red identified anything that did not make sense. By the end of the first week, there was far more red than I expected. Olivia asked me to reconstruct Richard's routines as carefully as possible. What time did he wake up? Who prepared his medication? When did he stop going to the office? Which friends did he see? Did Lauren visit regularly? I answered everything I could. Richard woke at 6 every morning, even after retirement. He made coffee, read the newspaper, and completed the crossword puzzle before breakfast. He managed his own medication and finances. Until the month before his death, he still reviewed quarterly reports from his former company. He forgot small things sometimes, as everyone does. He misplaced his glasses while they were resting on top of his head. He walked into the pantry and forgot what he wanted. Once he called Lauren by my sister's name, but he never forgot who we were. He never became incapable of understanding money, property, or legal decisions. Lauren's petition made him sound like a confused old man who could barely recognize his own home. That description was not merely inaccurate, it was cruel. Olivia arranged for Richard's primary physician, Dr. Nathan Caldwell, to give a formal statement. He confirmed that Richard had experienced one brief episode of dizziness and disorientation after a medication change. The symptoms lasted less than an hour. The medication was adjusted, and the problem never returned. Most importantly, the episode occurred nearly 5 months after Richard signed the will. That should weaken Lauren's argument, I said. It does, Olivia replied. But it won't end the case. Why not? Because they aren't relying only on medical incapacity. They're claiming you controlled his access to information and pressured him emotionally. I stared at her. How do I prove I didn't do something that is often the most difficult part of cases like this? Lauren's attorney, a polished man named Gregory Hale, submitted statements from 3 people. One was Patricia Richards' sister. She claimed Richard had become distant and that I often answered his phone on his behalf. What Patricia did not mention was that she usually called during dinner and spent every conversation criticizing Richard's business decisions. Another statement came from a former employee named Paul Sheridan. He claimed I discouraged Richard from returning to the office. That was true. What Paul failed to explain was that Richard had retired after repeated disagreements with the new management team. Returning to the office caused him unnecessary stress, and his doctor had advised him to reduce it. The third statement came from Lauren. She claimed Richard once told her he wanted to divide everything equally between us, but was afraid I would become angry. When I read that sentence, I laughed. It was not a joyful sound. Richard had never been afraid of my anger. In 43 years, our worst arguments had been about leaving wet towels on the bathroom floor and whether we truly needed 12 coffee mugs. Olivia watched me carefully. Did Richard ever discuss dividing the estate equally? He said Lauren would receive enough to be secure. He also said our home and savings had to protect me for the rest of my life. Did he ever mention being pressured by her no? The answer bothered me more each time I gave it. Richard had clearly been worried about something. I remembered the way he had looked toward the doorway before warning me about the phone. I remembered finding him in his study after midnight. Yet he had never told me the full truth. Perhaps he had been protecting me. Or perhaps he had been afraid I would confront Lauren and make matters worse. Olivia subpoenaed telephone records covering the final 18 months of Richard's life. When they arrived, she called me into her office. Lauren spoke with Richard far more often than you realized. The records showed repeated calls from Lauren's office and personal cell phone. Some lasted only minutes. Others continued for nearly an hour. Several occurred on days Lauren claimed she had not communicated with him. One call stood out. It happened the evening before Richard met Charles Mercer to finalize the will. Lauren had spoken to him for 47 minutes. "Do you remember that night?" Olivia asked. I searched my memory. We had dinner together. Richard barely ate. "Did he tell you why?" "He said he was tired." The following morning, Richard had driven alone to his attorney's office. That afternoon, he returned home carrying a sealed envelope and locked it inside his desk. I had never asked what it contained. Another troubling call occurred 2 weeks before Richard's death. It lasted 53 minutes. Immediately afterward, Richard called Charles Mercer. Then, less than an hour later, he used my flip phone for nearly 7 minutes. Olivia placed the record in front of me. "Do you recognize the number he called from your phone?" I examined it. The last 4 digits were unfamiliar. "No." We tried identifying it. It appears to have been a voicemail access number connected to the service provider. I looked up. "Yo, you mean he was checking messages?" We tried identifying it. It appears to have been a voicemail access number connected to the service provider. I looked up. "You mean he was checking messages?" "Possibly. Or recording one." My heart began beating faster. I thought of the night I had found Richard speaking quietly in the study. Can you recover what he did? Not from the billing record alone. Could the phone still contain it? Olivia's gaze shifted toward my purse. "Where is the device now?" "At home. Bring it to me tomorrow." I hesitated. The old phone felt private, almost sacred. It contained photographs Richard had taken, badly short messages asking me to buy milk, and the last calls we had exchanged. But privacy had already been taken from us. Lauren had turned our marriage into a courtroom accusation. "I'll bring it," I said. That evening, I sat alone at Richard's desk. The room still smelled faintly of his cedar aftershave. His reading glasses rested beside a jar of pens exactly where he had left them. I opened the top drawer and found the sealed envelope I remembered. It was empty. At first I thought I had made a mistake. Then I noticed the drawer's lock had been scratched around the edge. Someone had forced it open. Lauren had spent hours in that study after the funeral. I called Olivia immediately. "Do not touch anything else," she instructed. "Take photographs of the drawer and leave the room." The next morning, Olivia examined the images. "Can you prove the envelope contained estate documents?" "No, Richard never showed me." "Can you prove Lauren opened the drawer?" "No," she sighed. "Then we treat it as suspicious, not conclusive." I placed the old flip phone on the table between us. Its silver casing was scratched. The hinge had loosened, and the screen flickered when Olivia opened it. She pressed a few buttons. Nothing happened. "The battery may be dead. I charged it last night." Olivia connected the phone to another charger and waited. After several seconds, the screen glowed faintly. A photograph of Richard and me appeared. We were standing beneath an oak tree on our 40th anniversary, both laughing, because the wind had nearly carried away my hat. For a moment, I forgot why we were there. Then Olivia opened the call history. Most entries had disappeared because the phone stored only a limited number. The text message folder contained ordinary notes between Richard and me. "Buy bread. Doctor moved appointment to Thursday. Love you." Olivia read the last one and quietly looked away. She checked the recording folder. Empty. The voicemail menu would not load. "It may need network service," she said. "Lauren canceled the account after Richard died. She said I didn't need 2 phones." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Did you authorize her to do that, IT, hot she was helping with the bills?" "Lauren canceled the account after Richard died. She said I didn't need 2 phones." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Did you authorize her to do that? I thought she was helping with the bills." She wrote something on her legal pad. "Well, contact the carrier. There may be archived data." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. It was small and fragile, but it existed. Olivia continued examining the device. She copied the serial number, photographed the screen, and sealed the phone inside an evidence bag. Before she closed it, the screen flashed once. A tiny envelope-shaped symbol appeared in the corner. Then it vanished. "Did you see that?" I asked. Olivia froze. I did. What was it? Possibly a message notification. She reopened the phone, but the symbol was gone. The voicemail menu still refused to load. Olivia sealed the evidence bag. "We are not going to experiment with it ourselves. I'll send it to a digital forensic technician." "How long will that take?" "I don't know." I looked at the battered phone through the clear plastic. Everyone else saw an outdated object. I saw Richard's hands wrapping a red ribbon around its box. I heard him warning me not to throw it away. I remembered his voice behind the closed study door. Olivia gathered the documents and slid the phone into a locked case. "There's one more problem," she said. "What?" "The carrier records show Lauren contacted them 3 days after Richard's death about my account. She requested access to the family plan and asked whether deleted voicemails could be permanently removed." Coldness moved through me. Why would she ask that? Olivia closed the case. "That is exactly the question we're going to ask her." Later that afternoon, Lauren's attorney received notice that we intended to examine the phone and subpoena any available voicemail records. His response arrived within hours. He filed an objection arguing that the device was irrelevant, unreliable, and too old to produce trustworthy evidence. Lauren had mocked that phone for years. Now, before anyone had even heard what it might contain, she was fighting to keep it silent. And for the first time, I wondered whether my daughter already knew what Richard had left behind. The day the trial officially began, I wore the same navy dress I had worn to Richard's funeral. It was not a deliberate choice. It was simply the only thing in my closet that still felt appropriate for the weight of what I was carrying. The courthouse in Charleston stood with the kind of quiet authority that made every step inside feel heavier. The marble floors reflected the morning light, and the tall columns seemed to watch as people walked past lawyers with briefcases, clerks with files, families with tense faces, pretending everything was under control. Olivia walked beside me, steady and composed. "You don't need to say more than what is asked," she reminded me. "Just tell the truth." "I've been doing that my whole life," I said. She gave a small, knowing nod. "And today, that's enough." Inside the courtroom, Lauren was already seated beside Gregory Hale. Ethan sat slightly behind her, his expression tight, his posture more rigid than I had ever seen before. For a moment, I thought he might look at me. He didn't. Lauren glanced up briefly as I entered. Our eyes met for less than a second before she looked away, adjusting a strand of hair, as if she had simply noticed something unimportant. That moment hurt more than any accusation written in her petition. Judge Samuel Harper entered, and the room rose to its feet. The trial began with opening statements. Gregory Hale stood first. His voice was calm, polished, persuasive. He described Richard as a man who had grown vulnerable in his final years. He spoke of confusion, isolation, and influence. He painted a picture in which I became the central figure, quietly controlling, subtly guiding, shaping decisions that were never mine to shape. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is not a case about greed. It is a case about fairness, about restoring the true intentions of a father whose voice was overshadowed in his final days." I felt every word settle on me like dust that refused to be brushed away. Then Olivia stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not dramatize. She simply said, "This case is about truth, and truth does not need embellishment." She walked the court through the timeline. Richard's independence, his medical records, his meeting with Charles Mercer, the clear structure of the will. "And most importantly," she added, "this case is about whether we choose to believe evidence or whether we allow assumptions and emotions to rewrite a man's final decisions." She returned to her seat. The first witness was Lauren. She walked to the stand with confidence, her posture straight, her expression carefully composed. She looked like the successful professional I had once admired. For a moment, I saw the child she used to be. Then she began speaking. "My father was not himself during his last year," she said. "He became forgetful, dependent. He relied on my mother for everything." "That is not true," I whispered, but my voice never left my lips. Lauren described conversations that never happened. She spoke about moments she had exaggerated beyond recognition. "He told me he wanted everything to be equal," she said. "He didn't believe in favoring one over the other." Gregory Hale guided her gently, allowing her to build her version of the story piece by piece. "And did anything prevent him from acting on that belief?" he asked. Lauren hesitated just long enough to make the answer feel painful. "My mother," she said quietly. I closed my eyes. It was one thing to be misunderstood. It was another to be rewritten. Olivia rose for cross-examination. "Ms. Whitman," she began, "you testified that your father was forgetful. Can you give an example?" Lauren mentioned the misplaced glasses, the wrong names, the pantry incident. "Would you agree those are common occurrences for many people?" Olivia asked. "I suppose," Did your father ever fail to recognize you? No. Lauren mentioned the misplaced glasses, the wrong names, the pantry incident. Would you agree those are common occurrences for many people? Olivia asked. I suppose. Did your father ever fail to recognize you? No. Did he ever forget where he lived? No. Did he ever demonstrate an inability to understand financial matters? Lauren hesitated. No. Olivia paused. Then your claim is not that he lacked capacity in a medical sense, but that he was influenced. Yes. By your mother? Yes. Olivia walked closer. On the evening before your father finalized his will, you spoke with him for 47 minutes. Do you recall that call? Lauren stiffened. I may have. What was the subject of that conversation? I don't remember. You don't remember a 47-minute conversation the night before a major legal decision? Lauren's voice sharpened slightly. We spoke often. Olivia nodded. Indeed you did. You also spoke with him for 53 minutes 2 weeks before his death. Do you recall that conversation? Lauren's fingers tightened around the edge of the witness stand. No. During that call, did you discuss his estate? I don't recall. Olivia let the silence stretch. Did you ever ask your father to change his will? No. Did you ever suggest that your mother should receive less? No. Did you ever express concern about losing access to his assets? No. Each answer came faster, more defensive. Olivia returned to her table without further comment. The next witness was me. Walking to the stand felt like stepping into a version of my life I did not recognize. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. For a moment, I almost laughed. What else had I been doing all along? Gregory Hale approached. Mrs. Whitman, how long were you married to Richard Whitman? 43 years. And during that time, you managed the household? Yes. You were present for his daily routines? Yes. You had access to his financial documents? Yes. You accompanied him to medical appointments? Sometimes. You were aware of his condition during his final year? Yes. He leaned slightly closer. Would you agree that he depended on you? In some ways, yes. In important ways, in the ways spouses depend on each other. That was not my question. It is my answer. A faint ripple moved through the courtroom. Gregory Hale smiled thinly. Mrs. Whitman, did you ever discuss your husband's will with him? No. Never. It is my answer. A faint ripple moved through the courtroom. Gregory Hale smiled thinly. Mrs. Whitman, did you ever discuss your husband's will with him? No. Never in terms of changing it. So you claim he made those decisions entirely on his own? Yes. Without your input? Yes. Without your influence? Yes. He paused, then changed direction. Mrs. Whitman, are you familiar with this device? He held up my old flip phone. A few quiet chuckles passed through the room. My chest tightened. Yes, I said. How long have you owned it? Several years. Would you agree it is outdated? It still functions. That was not my question. It is my answer. More murmurs. Gregory Hale raised an eyebrow. Did your husband use this phone? Occasionally. For what purpose? To call me. Anything else? I hesitated. I don't know. He stepped closer. Mrs. Whitman, are you aware that this phone has no documented relevance to the case? I looked at the device in his hand. Its surface was scratched. The hinge creaked slightly as he opened it. To him, it was nothing. To me, it was the last object Richard had insisted I protect. I am aware that it belonged to my husband, I said quietly. That is not evidence. he replied. No, I said, but sometimes evidence doesn't look important at first. He smiled again as if humoring me. Your Honor, he said, turning toward the bench. We would like to note that the opposing party has repeatedly referenced this device despite its clear lack of relevance and technological reliability. Judge Harper made a brief note. We will address evidentiary matters when they arise, he said. Gregory Hale nodded and returned to his table. I stepped down from the stand, my hands trembling. As I passed Lauren, she leaned slightly toward Ethan and whispered something I could not hear. But I saw the smile. It was small, confident, certain, as if she already knew how this would end. The afternoon session dragged on with expert testimony and procedural arguments. Medical records were discussed again. Timelines were questioned. Each side repeated the same points with different emphasis. By the time the court recessed, I felt drained in a way grief alone had never caused. Outside the courtroom, Olivia walked beside me in silence. Today did not go as badly as you think, she said eventually. It felt like I was losing him all over again. She stopped. You are not losing him. It doesn't feel that way. It will, she said firmly, but not today. We returned to the courtroom the following morning. The atmosphere had shifted. Gregory Hale appeared more aggressive. Lauren seemed calmer, almost relieved. As if something had reassured her overnight, the session resumed with further argument about admissible evidence. Olivia placed the sealed evidence bag containing the phone on the table. We would like to introduce this device for limited examination, she said. Gregory Hale stood immediately. Objection. The device is outdated, unreliable, and irrelevant to the matter at hand. Olivia remained calm. We have reason to believe it may contain communications relevant to the decedent's intent. There is no proof of that, Hale replied. There is enough to justify examination. Judge Harper looked at both attorneys. Proceed carefully, he said. I will allow preliminary inspection, but no conclusions will be drawn without proper authentication. Olivia nodded. She opened the evidence bag slowly. The room seemed to quiet on its own. Lauren shifted in her seat. For the first time since the trial began, I saw something new in her expression. Not confidence, not irritation, something sharper, something closer to fear. Olivia turned the phone on. The small screen flickered to life. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in the upper corner, a tiny icon appeared. A single, unopened voicemail. Olivia's hand paused midair. The entire courtroom leaned forward, drawn by something no one had expected to matter. And suddenly, the object everyone had laughed at became the most important thing in the room. The courtroom had been filled with noise all morning. Papers, shifting chairs, creaking, whispered conversations passing between attorneys. But when Olivia said, "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we would like to access the voicemail," the courtroom had been filled with noise all morning. Papers, shifting chairs, creaking, whispered conversations passing between attorneys. But when Olivia said, "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we would like to access the voicemail," everything fell into a kind of unnatural silence. Even the air seemed to pause. Judge Harper adjusted his glasses. "Proceed," he said. Olivia nodded once, then carefully navigated through the phone's menu again. Her fingers moved slower this time, deliberate, almost cautious, as if she understood that whatever waited inside that tiny device could not be undone once it was heard. The voicemail icon blinked once. Then it opened. A single message. No timestamp visible on the main screen. No name. Just a number. Gregory Hale rose immediately. "Your Honor, we object. There has been no authentication of this recording, no verification of origin." Olivia didn't interrupt him. She simply waited. Judge Harper raised his hand. Objection noted. Gregory Hale rose immediately. Your Honor, we object. There has been no authentication of this recording, no verification of origin. Olivia didn't interrupt him. She simply waited. Judge Harper raised his hand. Objection noted, he said. We will hear the content for preliminary purposes only. Final admissibility will be determined afterward. Gregory Hale sat down slowly, but I noticed something. His confidence had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't as steady as before. Olivia pressed play. At first there was nothing, just a faint crackle of static like wind brushing against an old radio. Then Richard's voice, soft, uneven, but unmistakably his. Martha, if you're hearing this, then I didn't get the chance to explain everything the way I wanted to. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't realized I had stopped breathing until that moment. The entire courtroom leaned forward. Even Lauren. Richard continued. I'm using your phone because it's the only one I know won't be checked. A ripple of confusion moved through the room. Olivia didn't move. Gregory Hale didn't speak. Richard's voice trembled slightly, but it carried a clarity that cut through every doubt that had been raised about his mind. I need you to understand something, he said. I didn't change my will because I stopped loving our daughter. I changed it because I became afraid of what she was asking me to do. A sound escaped from Lauren's side of the room. It wasn't a word. It was closer to a breath that had lost control. Richard continued. She started talking about the house, about selling it, about how the market was right. She said it didn't make sense for you to keep living there alone. My hands began to shake. That conversation had happened. Lauren had brought it up casually, once suggesting I could move into a smaller place, something more practical. I had thought it was just a suggestion. Richard had heard something else. She told me it would be easier if everything was already arranged, he said. That way there wouldn't be confusion later. His voice tightened. She didn't realize I had already made arrangements. The courtroom was completely still now. No one moved. No one whispered. She asked me to change things, Richard said. Not directly at first, just suggestions. Then more directly. She said it wasn't fair that so much would go to you when she could manage it better. I closed my eyes. Each word felt like something breaking open inside me. I told her no. He continued, more than once. There was a pause, a long one. I wish I had told you sooner. My fingers pressed against the edge of the bench in front of me. She became angry, Richard said. Not the kind of anger that fades, the kind that plans. A faint murmur moved through the courtroom. Judge Harper tapped his gavel lightly. Order. Richard's voice lowered as if he had been afraid even then. She started asking about my accounts, my passwords, who had access to what. She said she was trying to help, but it didn't feel like help. Another pause. I don't think she meant to become this person, he said quietly. But somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing people. She started seeing value. Lauren's chair scraped against the floor. Gregory Hale placed a hand on her arm, but she pulled away slightly. Richard's voice softened again. I made the changes to protect you, Martha, not to punish her. The words landed differently, not as anger, not as accusation, as something deeper, regret. I thought if everything was clear, she would accept it. I was wrong. My vision blurred. I don't know what she'll do after I'm gone, he said, but I know this. She won't stop if she believes something belongs to her. There was another sound, not from Lauren this time, from Ethan, a quiet exhale as if something he had suspected was finally confirmed. I'm leaving this message here because she doesn't respect this phone, Richard said. She won't look at it twice. A faint, almost sad smile touched his voice. And sometimes the things people ignore are the ones that matter most. The line went silent for a second. Then his voice returned softer than before. I love you. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. The message ended. No dramatic cut. No final sound. Just silence. But it was not the same silence as before. This one carried weight. Judge Harper leaned back in his chair. Gregory Hale did not stand. Lauren stared straight ahead, her face pale, her expression no longer controlled. For the first time since the trial began, she'll looked uncertain. Olivia closed the phone gently. Your Honor, she said, we request that this recording be admitted as evidence of the decedent's intent and state of mind. Looked uncertain. Olivia closed the phone gently. Your Honor, she said, we request that this recording be admitted as evidence of the decedent's intent and state of mind. Gregory Hale rose slowly. This recording is unverified, he said. There is no timestamp, no independent authentication, no guarantee that it hasn't been altered. Olivia interrupted him this time. The voice is clearly identifiable. The content directly addresses the matters in dispute, and the circumstances under which it was recorded, specifically the use of a device the opposing party dismissed and ignored, support its credibility. Judge Harper remained silent for several seconds, long enough for every person in the room to feel the weight of the decision. Finally, he spoke. I will allow the recording to be provisionally admitted, he said. Final weight will be determined after full consideration. Gregory Hale sat down, his expression tight. Lauren turned toward him. Say something, she whispered. But he didn't, because for the first time, there was nothing left to reshape. The truth had spoken in its own voice, and it had come from the one place no one had thought to look. I sat there, unable to move, unable to speak, not because I was weak, but because I had just heard my husband defend me after he was gone. And across the room, my daughter finally lowered her eyes. After the voicemail ended, nothing in that courtroom felt the same. Not the walls, not the air, not even the distance between my daughter and me. Truth has a way of rearranging everything without moving a single object. Judge Harper called for a short recess, but no one truly relaxed. People stood, whispered, avoided eye contact. A few glanced at me with something softer than curiosity. Understanding. For the first time since the trial began, I was no longer the woman being questioned. I was the woman who had been protected. Olivia leaned toward me. This changes everything, she said quietly. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. Across the room, Lauren stood frozen near the defense table. Gregory Hale was speaking to her in low, urgent tones, but she barely reacted. Ethan stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the back of her chair, not touching her, but close enough to show he was still there. Still choosing her. Still hoping. When the court resumed, Gregory Hale requested permission to respond immediately. Your Honor? He began, his voice steady but tighter than before. While the emotional impact of this recording is undeniable, we must not confuse emotion with evidence. There is no verification of when this message was recorded, under what conditions, or whether it reflects the decedent's true state of mind. Olivia stood. Then let's verify it, she said. She requested a brief continuance to allow the forensic technician to analyze the phone and the voicemail metadata. Judge Harper agreed. The trial paused for 3 days. 3 days that felt longer than the weeks before. During that time, the phone became more than evidence. It became a battleground. The forensic report confirmed what Olivia had suspected. The voicemail had been recorded 12 days before Richard's death. It had not been altered. The voice was authenticated as his. And most importantly, the system logs showed that someone had attempted to access and delete voicemail records from the account shortly after his death. The request had come from a secondary authorized user. Lauren, when Olivia showed me the report, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something heavier. Because proof doesn't just reveal truth. It reveals intention. And intention is harder to forgive. The courtroom was even more crowded when the trial resumed. Word had spread, not through headlines or television, but through people, through quiet conversations, through that invisible network of attention that forms when something real begins to surface. Olivia presented the forensic findings methodically. No dramatics, no raised voice, just facts. The date of the recording, the confirmation of Richard's voice, the attempted deletion request. Gregory Hale objected again, but this time his arguments felt thinner, less certain. Judge Harper allowed the evidence. Fully. Lauren was called back to the stand. She walked slower this time, not defeated, but no longer certain. Olivia approached her. Ms. Whitman, she began, did you attempt to access your father's voicemail account after his death? Lauren hesitated. Yes. For what purpose? I was organizing his accounts. Did you request that any messages be deleted? No. Olivia lifted the report. This document indicates a request was made from your authorized user account to remove archived voicemails. Lauren's voice tightened. I don't remember that. Do you deny me making the request? I don't remember. This document indicates a request was made from your authorized user account to remove archived voicemails. Lauren's voice tightened. I don't remember that. Do you deny making the request? I don't remember. Olivia took a step closer. Ms. Whitman, your father stated in his recorded message that he used this phone because it would not be checked. Why would he believe that? I don't know. Had you ever looked through his other devices? No. Had you ever asked for access to his accounts? Eyes, but only to help. Help manage them. Yes. Help control them. No. The word came out too quickly, too sharp. Olivia let the silence stretch. Did you ask your father to change his will? No. Olivia pressed a button on a small device. The courtroom speakers filled again with Richard's voice. She asked me to change things more directly. Lauren's breath caught. Olivia turned off the playback. Would you like to revise your answer? Lauren's hands gripped the edge of the stand. I suggested things. What did you suggest? That it would be fair to divide things more evenly. And when he refused, I accepted it. Olivia held her gaze. Did you? Lauren didn't answer. The silence became its own answer. Olivia stepped back slightly. Ms. Whitman, did you ever suggest selling your parents' home while your mother was still living there? Lauren's eyes flickered. I mentioned it as an option. An option for whom? For her. For your mother. Yes. Did she express interest in leaving her home? No. Did your father express interest in forcing her to leave? No. I mentioned it as an option. An option for whom? For her. For your mother. Yes. Did she express interest in leaving her home? No. Did your father express interest in forcing her to leave? No. Then who was the option truly? For Lauren's composure cracked. I was thinking about the future. At whose expense? I was thinking about what made sense. For you. For everyone. Her voice rose for the first time. Judge Harper tapped his gavel. Control your tone. Lauren swallowed hard. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. I was trying to help, she said, quieter now. Olivia's voice softened, but not in sympathy. In your father's own words, he felt afraid of what you were asking him to do. Do you understand that? Lauren shook her head. No, that's not what I meant. But it is what he experienced. Lauren's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. There was something there I hadn't seen in months. Not anger, not pride. Something closer to confusion. And beneath it, fear. Olivia returned to her seat. The defense called no further witnesses. They didn't need to. There was nothing left to reshape. Closing arguments came that afternoon. Gregory Hale spoke carefully, choosing each word as if stepping through fragile ground. He acknowledged the recording, but he tried to reframe it. A single message, he said, cannot erase a lifetime of relationship. We must consider the possibility that fear, misunderstanding, or emotional stress influenced the decedent's words. Olivia stood last. She didn't argue. She told the truth. Richard Whitman made a decision, she said. A clear, documented, legally executed decision. And when he feared that decision might be challenged, he left behind something even clearer. His voice. She paused. Not to punish his daughter, but to protect his wife. She looked directly at the judge. This case is not about dividing assets. It is about honoring intent. Judge Harper adjourned the court for deliberation. The waiting felt longer than the entire trial. I sat on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, my hands folded in my lap, staring at nothing. Lauren sat across from me. Neither of us spoke. At one point, Ethan tried to say something to her, but she shook her head. Silence again. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of everything we hadn't said for years. After what felt like hours, but was likely less than one, the bailiff opened the door. Court is back in session. We stood. We walked in. We waited. Judge Harper looked down at his notes, then up at us. His voice was calm, measured, final. In the matter of the estate of Richard Whitman, the court finds no sufficient evidence of incapacity or undue influence. The will is upheld in full. A breath I didn't know I was holding, finally released. The court further notes, he continued that the decedent's recorded statement provides clear and compelling insight into his intent. That intent shall be respected. The gavel struck. It is so ordered. It was over. Just like that. But some endings don't feel like endings. They feel like something else beginning. I turned toward Lauren. She was still standing, still staring forward. But this time, there was no confidence left in her posture. Only something quiet, something broken. And for the first time since this began, she looked like my daughter again. When the courtroom emptied, the silence that followed was not relief. It was aftermath. People left in small clusters, speaking in low voices, their expressions carrying the quiet gravity of something witnessed and understood. Olivia spoke briefly with the clerk, then turned back to me. You're free to go, she said gently. Free. It was a strange word, because nothing about what had just happened felt simple enough to be called freedom. I nodded, thanked her, and stepped toward the exit, but I stopped halfway. Lauren was still there, standing alone near the defense table. Ethan had stepped outside, giving her space. Gregory Hale had already gathered his files and left without looking back. For the first time since the trial began, she had no one beside her. I hesitated. 43 years of marriage had ended in a heartbeat. But motherhood doesn't end with a verdict. It lingers, even when it hurts, even when it breaks. I walked toward her slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I stopped in front of her, she didn't look up immediately. Her hands rested on the table, fingers curled slightly, as if she were holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. "Lauren," I said. My voice sounded softer than I expected. She flinched. Then she looked up. Her eyes were red, not from the kind of tears that fall easily, but from the kind that sit behind your eyes and refuse to leave. "I didn't know," she said. "It wasn't defensive. It wasn't sharp. It was small." I studied her face. "You didn't know what I asked." "That he felt that way." Her voice trembled slightly. I thought she stopped, then shook her head. "I thought he just didn't understand what I was trying to do." "And what were you trying to do?" She looked down again. "I thought I was being practical," she said. "I thought if things were structured better, it would be easier later." "For who?" I asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "For me." There it was. Not greed, not cruelty, something more familiar. Self-interest disguised as logic. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she added quickly. I thought you didn't need all of it. I thought I could manage things better. I thought you knew better than your father," I said. She winced. "Yes." The honesty hung between us, uncomfortable, necessary. "I didn't think he would." She swallowed hard. "I didn't think he would be afraid of me. Neither did I." That was the part that hurt the most. Because fear doesn't appear overnight. It builds, quietly. In moments we ignore. In conversations we don't take seriously. In assumptions we don't question. He loved you because fear doesn't appear overnight. It builds, quietly. In moments we ignore. In conversations we don't take seriously. In assumptions we don't question. "He loved you," I said. "I know." "No," I said softly. "You don't. Not fully. Because if you did, you would have heard him when he said no." Her eyes filled again. "Thought he would come around. And when he didn't," she looked away. I thought she hesitated. "I thought maybe you were the reason." I let out a slow breath. "That's what you told the court." I was angry. "So you chose a version of the truth that justified your anger." She nodded barely. "I didn't think it would go this far. But it always does. That's the thing about choices. They don't stay where we make them. They travel. They grow. They become something else." The silence returned, but this time it felt different. Not empty. Not heavy. Just real. Lauren wiped her eyes quickly, as if embarrassed by the emotion. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. I didn't answer immediately, because forgiveness isn't a word, it's a process. And isn't a word, it's a process. And processes don't begin with declarations. They begin with truth. "I don't know if I can forgive you today," I said honestly. She nodded. I understand. But I also know this, I continued. You're still my daughter. Processes don't begin with declarations. They begin with truth. I don't know if I can forgive you today. I said honestly. She nodded. I understand. But I also know this. I continued. You're still my daughter. Her breath caught. And that doesn't disappear because of what happened in that courtroom. She looked at me again. Really looked. For the first time in a long time, there was no argument behind her eyes. No defense. Just recognition. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. You don't fix it, I said. You face it. How? By telling the truth. Even when it makes you uncomfortable. Especially then. She let that settle. Then slowly, I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they weren't empty. They didn't erase what had happened. They didn't undo the accusations. They didn't change the past. But they mattered. Because they were real. I nodded. That's where it starts. We stood there for a moment longer. Not reconciled, not healed, but no longer pretending. And sometimes, that's the closest thing to healing you can get. Ethan returned a few minutes later. He paused when he saw us standing together, his expression uncertain. Lauren glanced at him, then back at me. I'm going to need time, she said. So am I. She gave a small, almost fragile nod. Then she walked toward Ethan. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and together they left the courtroom. I watched them go. Not with anger, not with relief, with something quieter. Acceptance. Later that afternoon, I returned home. The house felt different. Not empty, just still. I walked into the kitchen and stood in the same place where Richard had fallen. For the first time, I didn't replay the moment. I didn't question what I could have done differently. I didn't search for answers that no longer mattered. Instead, I walked to the drawer beside the counter. I opened it. Inside, the old flip phone rested where Olivia had returned it after the trial. I picked it up carefully. The hinge creaked as I opened it. The screen flickered. Richard's face appeared again, captured in that old photograph beneath the oak tree. Smiling, alive. I pressed the voicemail icon. The message was still there, untouched. I didn't press play. I didn't need to. Because I had already heard what mattered. He had trusted me. He had protected me. And in the end, he had told the truth. I closed the phone and held it in my hands for a moment longer. Then I placed it back in the drawer. Not because it was unimportant, but because I no longer needed it to prove anything. The truth had already done that. That evening, I sat on the back porch as the sun set over the yard Richard had loved. The oak tree swayed gently in the wind. The same tree from the photograph. The same tree where we had laughed 40 years into a life we never thought would be questioned. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since the trial began, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And sometimes real is enough. Life doesn't always break in loud, dramatic ways. Sometimes it fractures quietly through assumptions, through pride, through the belief that we know better than the people who love us most. This story isn't just about a will or money or a courtroom decision. It's about something deeper. It's about listening, about respecting boundaries, about understanding that love does not give us the right to control, only the responsibility to care. Martha's journey reminds us that truth doesn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it hides in small, overlooked places, like an old phone no one takes seriously. And Lauren's story reminds us that good intentions can still lead to painful consequences when they are driven by self-interest instead of empathy. We all make mistakes, but what defines us is what we do after the truth is revealed. Do we deny it, or do we face it? If you were in Martha's position, would you forgive? And if you were in Lauren's place, would you have done anything differently? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your story, your perspective, or even where you're watching from, and what time it is in your part of the world. And if this story moved you in any way, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes, the stories we need most are the ones that remind us who we really are.